Welcome back to Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal as we're paying a visit in this week's episode to the Warner Robins Museum of Aviation. We return now this look at an A-10A Warthog. Now, the more updated version of the A-10 continues its role as a ground support attack aircraft in the Central Asian theater. It is, of course, the first airplane ever which was designed around a weapons system. There's, of course, more exhibit space in the Eagle Building at the Air Museum, a gift shop, and the Georgia Aviation Hall of Fame. To date, 84 men and women have been inducted to recognize their contributions to the advancement of aviation. Here's an interesting bit of trivia. Did you know the famous aviator Charles Lindbergh actually bought his first plane right here in Georgia? To be specific, Lindbergh purchased a Curtiss JN-4 Jenny, a World War I surplus airplane in Americus, Georgia, way back in May of 1923. His first solo flight took place from Sutherfield, where a marker stands to commemorate the occasion. Speaking of pilots, perhaps you are already one, or maybe you would just like to experience the thrill of flight and air combat. Well, at the Air Museum, you can do just that. No, you're not going to get to fly one of the classic airplanes, but you can climb into their state-of-the-art simulator.
This is strictly a motion simulator. We have 12 different rides that you can choose from, and it goes through all of the motions as if you were participating in that particular ride. A perfect example is one of my favorite rides is Desert Storm. Okay, the Desert Storm ride, you're going to start off, you're in a body of a jet. You're going to be in the body of the aircraft carrier, go up the elevator to the flight deck. You get positioned to take off on the flight deck. Once you get positioned, then you will take off, fly into Iraq, and you will do a mission in Iraq. You're going to look for the Scud missiles. You're going to look for other things to knock out and everything. And you're going to have an enemy aircraft going to come into view. You're going to have a little situation with the enemy aircraft. And then eventually you're going to start to head back to the aircraft carrier. On the way back to the aircraft carrier, you're going to have a little incident that's going to happen, which I don't like to give away for the for people that are in the ride and everything. But it's a good experience. Some people get the impression that they're going to have to eject or anything like that. But you manage to survive, and you eventually come back and you land back on the aircraft carrier. So it gives you the real feel of flying in the plane. The only thing you do not attain is the G-forces. But other than that, you get a very good response. You get good motion. This thing does a lot of rights and lefts and ups and downs. And people come out and they're very, very thrilled with the ride that they had. The Seahawk is my other aircraft ride that I always push. That's a different type of plane. That's the old type Seahawk observation seaplane. That one there is on a battleship. It gets catapulted off of the battleship, flies into Iwo Jima, does a mission in Iwo Jima, and it has flak thrown at it and everything. And then there's an aircraft that attacks it, and they end up attacking the aircraft. They shoot the aircraft down. Part of the material from the aircraft comes in and breaks the windscreen. So now the plane's having a little difficulty. It ends up going back out to sea, and it finds Japanese destroyer, and what it does is it starts anti-aircraft, and it ends up there's an explosion, and they do have a little fire.
There are some amazing adventures to be had inside the simulator, from bombing raids to dogfights. Now, you might not get airsick, but you'll gain a whole new appreciation for what a pilot and a mission is all about. Turn another corner in the Eagle Building, and you'll find a cross-section of a B-17 and get a close look at what life was like for the crewmen as they did their jobs, dodged flak, and enemy fighters. Speaking of bombers, we hop on over to the World War II hangar, where Executive Director Ken Emery talks about preservation efforts and an award-winning exhibit.
We're trying to tell stories from a wide variety. In the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which was involved in the invasion of Normandy, air invasion really of Normandy, and the part how the Army Air Corps took them in on C-47s on the night before D-Day, and some of those stories and some of the artifacts that are there on display in the World War II hangar, as well as a cutaway C-47, actual C-47 airplane, where you can see inside the airplane and the air crew and the pilot and the co-pilot and radio operators and some of the paratroopers that were in there. Kind of gives you that feel of being there. And that's part of conveying the story of the Air Force and some of those conflicts, to educate folks, both young and old, about those kinds of conflicts and all that part of history that's out there that people need to know about.
Inside the tribute to the Parachute Infantry Regiment, you walk through a convincing trip from the planning stages to the buildup and execution of Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion at Normandy. Of course, the men who hit the beaches at Gold Sword, Juneau, and Omaha all arrived via ship and landing craft. Leading the way, however, while those men were still crossing the English Channel, were the paratroops, who were carried inland from Normandy by C-47s and then dropped off into the darkness, enemy fire, and well behind Nazi lines. Some of their men, they died before they ever hit the ground. Other paratroopers died in flooded fields. Some who were arriving in gliders died when they crashed into obstacles planned by German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The award-winning exhibit will give you a very unique perspective on the events in and surrounding the village of Grenier. Plane here is a North American B-25 Mitchell. It was considered a medium bomber, made famous mainly in the first attack of the war carried out by American forces, the Doolittle raids on Tokyo, which was a one-way ticket. Now, to truly appreciate conditions inside a B-25, we're going to flash you back to 2009. That's when I had the opportunity to take a flight in the VFW's B-25, the Panchito. We took off out of the Perry Airport and circled some of the region. The twin props, they are quite loud, and the Mitchell vibrates as you prepare for takeoff. The medium bomber might look big, but it's a tight space between pilot and co-pilot. And to access the bombardier's position in the nose, you have to crawl through a tunnel beneath the pilot. Once into the nose of the aircraft, your perspective changes a great deal. The sensation of being alone there makes it all too easy to imagine what those crews experienced over hostile skies. Some bombers were a little less cramped, like the B-29. It had advanced features that earned it the nickname Super Fortress. Just a few examples of the bomber that brought an end to World War II and was the jumping-off point for supersonic flight remain. We'll continue with more from the Museum of Aviation in a moment with Todd Wilson's Georgia Journal. I hope you'll stay tuned.